Welcome to section 1.2. This is one of the most foundational sections. It introduces the framework that John Gianni and Terry, our OER authors, use throughout every chapter that follows. The ABCs of social psychology: affect, behavior, and cognition. The textbook is direct about why these three. They are the basic and interrelated human capacities we rely on to maintain and enhance our lives through successful interaction with others. Notice it says interrelated. These three aren't independent. They constantly shape each other. Your cognition influences your affect drives your behavior produces outcomes that feed back into your cognition. They work as a system. The ABC model: affect, the feelings we experience as part of our everyday lives. Behavior, B, the interactions we have with others, shaped by social exchange. And C, cognition, the mental activity of processing social information and using it in judgment. These directly reflect the definition of social psychology itself, the study of how we think about, feel about, and behave towards people in our lives. One more thing before we dive in. The textbook actually covers these in a slightly surprising order. It starts with cognition, then affect, then behavior. So that's the order we'll follow because understanding how we think about others sets up everything else. Let's start with cognition. The human brain contains about 86 billion neurons, each capable of connecting with tens of thousands of others. What makes mammal brains, and especially human brains, distinctive is the cerebral cortex, the part involved in thinking, and a huge portion of that thinking is social. Social cognition is cognition that relates to social activities, and that helps us understand and predict the behavior of ourselves and others. This is a broad definition. Social cognition includes how you form impressions of people you've just met, how you remember what your professor said last Tuesday, how you decide whether your friend's comment was a joke or an insult, and how you predict what your boss is likely to do when you ask for time off. All of that is social cognition. Over time, the textbook explains, we develop a set of social knowledge, information about ourselves, other people, social relationships, and social groups. This knowledge doesn't sit idle. It actively shapes how we perceive new situations, how we remember past events, and how we make judgments. Two types of social knowledge are especially important in social psychology: schemas and attitudes. Now to affect, the feeling sides of the ABC model. The textbook definition is simple. Affect refers to the feelings we experience as part of our everyday lives. Happy, sad, jealous, grateful, proud, embarrassed. These are all examples of affect. And notice, affect isn't just a passenger in our lives. The textbook makes a strong claim here. Our affective experiences normally help us to function efficiently in ways that increase our chances of survival. Affect does two things in the textbook's framework. First, it signals us about how things are going. Good mood, things are probably okay. Bad mood, anxiety or anger, something may be wrong. Second, affect leads us towards appropriate behaviors. When happy, we seek out others. When angry, we may confront or attack. When fearful, we withdraw or flee. Affect is an action guidance system. Within affect, the textbook draws a crucial distinction between two forms: mood and emotion. These get confused, so pay attention. Mood is the positive or negative feelings that are in the background of our everyday experiences. It's diffuse, long-lasting, and not tied to a specific clause. Most of the time, we're in a relatively good mood, and the textbook cites research showing that positive mood has real consequences. It encourages us to do what needs to be done, opens up our thought processes, and makes us more likely to approach others. Eisen's 2003 research is cited. Good mood makes us more friendly, more helpful, more creative. Bad mood does the reverse. We withdraw, our creativity suffers, we become more self-focused. Background feeling is a positive or negative, diffuse and relatively long-lasting, not caused by a specific event. Good mood, you'll approach others, you're more helpful, more creative. Bad mood, you'll withdraw, reduce creativity, less helpful. Emotions are brief, but often intense. mental and physiological feeling states. They are short-lived, stronger, and more specific than moods. Emotions differ from moods in several key ways. They're caused by specific events. Something makes you jealous or angry or guilty. They're accompanied by high levels of physiological arousal. Your heart rate might change, your palms might sweat, and they tend to be short-lived. We experience moods in ordinary everyday situations, but emotions arise when something out of the ordinary happens. Emotions also serve as a clear adaptive function. The textbook puts it elegantly. Just as we run from a snake because it elicits fear, we try to make amends with other people when we feel guilty. Emotions are evolved signals that guide us towards survival-promoting behavior. Fear, you might flee. Anger, you might confront. Guilt, you might repair. Love, you'll invest in the relationship. The key distinctions between mood and emotion. Duration, moods last longer, emotions are brief. Intensity, emotions are stronger. Cause, mood lacks a specific trigger, emotions are caused by specific events. Arousal, emotions are accompanied by a physiological arousal, moods are not. Specificity, moods are diffuse. I feel off today. Emotions are targeted. I'm angry at her for this. Now the B, behavior. The textbook makes an important point right up front. Because we interact with and influence each other every day, we have developed the ability to make these interactions proceed efficiently and effectively. Social behavior isn't random, it's structured, and the core structure is social exchange. Social exchange is the sharing of goods, services, emotions, and other social outcomes between people. In any social interaction, there are rewards and costs. Social rewards are the positive things we give and receive: attention, praise, affection, love, financial support. Social costs are the negative things: frustration from conflict, guilt when we've done something wrong, the effort required to maintain a relationship. People generally try to maximize rewards and minimize costs. That's the self-concern motivation that we covered in section 1.1, showing up in behavior. The textbook uses a concrete example to bring this alive. Imagine a first-year student deciding whether to join a student club. The costs: dues, times in meeting, effort to make new friends. The benefits: a social network, people with shared interests, activities to participate in. Before deciding, the student, consciously or not, weighs those costs and benefits. That's social exchange in action. But here's the important corrective the textbook adds. People don't just selfishly maximize. Other concern tempers self-concern. Social exchange is generally fair and equitable, at least in the long run. The textbook gives a simple example. If someone asks you for a favor and you do it, you expect that they'd be willing to return the favor someday. Not necessarily immediately, but eventually. That expectation of reciprocity is what holds social exchange together. This leads directly to one of the most important concepts in this section: reciprocal altruism. Reciprocal altruism is the mutual and generally equitable exchange of benefits, giving benefits to those in need with the exception of a return of benefits at a future time. This is an evolutionary idea. Over thousands of years living in small groups, people learned to cooperate by giving benefits to those who needed them, with the implicit understanding that the favor would be returned when the positions reversed. A group member who's temporarily sick or injured benefits from others' help right now, and when they recover, they're expected to reciprocate when someone else is in need. For reciprocal altruism to work, people need to track who's playing by the rules. And the textbook cites fascinating research on exactly this. Mealy, Dowd, and Craig in 1996 found that people are particularly good at recognizing and remembering cheaters, those who take benefits without reciprocating. We have enhanced memory for faces of people who have taken benefits without reciprocating and have violated that reciprocity. And cheaters are judged extremely negatively. This makes evolutionary sense. A group that can identify and exclude free riders will outcompete one that cannot. Key points of reciprocal altruism: mutual, equitable exchange of benefits over time, not necessarily immediate. Evolutionary origin: living in small groups for thousands of years shaped these tendencies. It requires tracking. People need to know who has given, who's received, who owes whom. Cheater detection. We have enhanced memory for faces of those who violate reciprocity. Cheaters are judged extremely negatively. Free riding undermines group cooperation. Before a social psychologist runs any correlational or experimental study, they have to state what they're looking for in precise, testable form. That's called a research hypothesis. It's a specific prediction about the relationship between the variables and the direction of that relationship. It's a specific prediction about the relationship between the variables of interest and about the specific direction of that relationship. For example, people who are more similar to each other will be more attracted to each other. The key property of a good research hypothesis is that it is falsifiable. That means the outcome of the research can either support the hypothesis or show it's wrong. If a hypothesis can never be proven false, no matter what the data shows, it isn't scientifically useful. The hypothesis that similarity increases attraction is falsifiable because research could show either no relationship between the two variables or even that people are attracted to those who are dissimilar to them. This requirement for falsifiability is what separates science from belief. A prediction like people will eventually change is not falsifiable. It can always be claimed that the change just hasn't happened yet. Social psychology demands predictions specific enough to be tested and potentially proven wrong. Correlational research tests whether two or more variables are statistically associated. The Pearson correlation coefficient, symbolized as R, summarizes the strength and direction of that association. It runs from -1, a perfect negative relationship, through 0, no relationship, to a +1, which is a perfect positive relationship. The textbook's running example is violent video games and aggression. Researchers have found a correlation of R equals 0.30 between how often people play violent video games and how aggressively they behave. A key advantage of correlational designs, they allow prediction. If we know someone's score on one variable, we can estimate their likely score on another. For example, high school grades predicting university grades. But here's a fundamental limitation, and the textbook is emphatic about it. Correlation does not imply causation. Even when two variables are strongly correlated, you cannot conclude that one caused the other. There are 3 possible explanations for any correlation, and you have to consider all of them. Forward causation. Variable A causes variable B. So, for example, violent games equal more aggression. Reverse causation. Variable B actually causes variable A. More aggressive people are drawn to play violent games, not the other way around. Or third variable, common causal variable. An unmeasured third variable causes both A and B, making them appear related, even though neither cause the other. So, for example, testosterone levels might independently cause both increased aggression and more interest in violent games. The textbook uses a brilliant everyday example of third variables. Students who sit at the front of a lecture hall get better grades than students who sit at the back. Is it because sitting up front causes better grades? Maybe, but it's also very likely that a common causal variable like motivation or interest in the course is causing students to both sit in front and get better grades. Seating position and grades are correlated, but neither cause the other. Third variables, as described in the textbook, or mystery variables, quote unquote, because they're often unknown. The researcher hasn't measured them and may not even suspect that they exist. Since you can never measure every possible confounding variable, you can never fully rule out third variables in a correlational design. That's why correlation, however useful for prediction, will never prove causation on its own. To actually establish causation, to know that one thing caused another, we need an experiment. An experimental design manipulates an independent variable across 2 or more groups that have been made equivalent before the manipulation. Then measures the dependent variable after. The independent variable is what the researcher changes. The dependent variable is what gets measured to see if it changed. The textbook walks through Anderson and Dill's 2000 experiment in detail. This is the key example for this whole section. They randomly assigned roughly 100 university students to one of 2 groups. Group A played a violent video game for 15 minutes. Group B played a non-violent game for the same time. Afterwards, both groups competed in a task where they could blast white noise through headphones at an opponent. The level and duration of noise blast was the operational definition of the independent variable. Aggressive behavior. Here's why random assignment is so powerful, because participants were randomly placed into groups. The groups were statistically equivalent at the start, similar in family background, hormone levels, diet, personality, and everything else that could affect aggression. So when the groups differed on the independent variable, afterward, the only possible explanation was the independent variable. Random assignment rules out both reverse causation and third variables in one move. The internal validity is the extent to which changes in the dependent variable in an experiment can confidently be attributed to changes in the independent variable. High internal validity is achieved through random assignment and tight experimental control. Experiments are powerful for establishing causation, but they come in real limitations. The first is artificiality. Most social psychology experiments happen in labs with college students in controlled situations that don't look much like everyday life. This raises the question of external validity, where the findings hold up when we test them in different settings, with different people, and under different circumstances. One partial solution is the field experiment, an experimental design conducted in a natural environment like a school, a workplace, or a street corner rather than a lab. Field experiments preserve the causal logic of the experiment. You still manipulate an independent variable and measure a dependent variable, but the setting is real life. The trade-off is that random assignment becomes much harder to implement when you're working outside a controlled lab. The second limitation of experiments is that many of the most interesting social variables simply cannot be manipulated ethically. You cannot randomly assign some people to join a suicide cult and others not to. You can't randomly assign some children to abusive home environments. For questions like these, personality differences between cult members and non-members, effects of childhood trauma on late behavior, correlational designs are the only option, even though they can't establish causation. External validity, the extent to which researchers' findings generalize beyond the specific study to other people's studies and contexts. Field experiment is an experimental study conducted in a real-world environment rather than a lab. It preserves causal logic, but makes random assignment harder. Meta-analysis is a statistical technique that combines and analyzes data from many studies on the same topic, providing an overall picture of the strength and consistency of a relationship across the research literature. To build confidence across many individual studies, each with their own limitations, researchers use meta-analysis. Rather than relying on single experiment or correlational study, a meta-analysis pulls the data from dozens or even hundreds of studies and computes the overall effect. If the relationship holds up across many different research teams, methods, and populations, that's much stronger evidence than any one study alone could provide. And finally, ethics. The textbook is clear that social psychology's complicated history with Milgram and Zimbardo led to mandatory ethical standards that now govern all human subjects research. Every study must go through an IRB. Participants must give informed consent before starting, have the right to withdraw at any time, be protected from harm, and receive a full debriefing afterward, especially when deception was used. Participants can even choose to withdraw their data after learning what the study was really about. These protections exist because of real harm done to real people, and they're non-negotiable. That concludes Chapter 1.